I never thought I'd be sharing this story, but the weight of it has been crushing me for months. Sleep eludes me, haunted by memories I can't shake. I had hoped that a week in the wilderness would bring some respite. No technology, no distractions, just me and the tranquil forest. But I was wrong, so terribly wrong. The forest didn't welcome me. It made it painfully clear that I didn't belong. It all started when I decided to rent a remote cabin to work on my novel. I'd been struggling with writer's block for months, and I thought a change of scenery might spark my creativity. The listing promised solitude and inspiration, nestled deep in the heart of the woods. Perfect, I thought, just what I needed to clear my head and focus on my writing. The first few nights were blissful. The silence was a balm to my frayed nerves, and I found myself relaxing for the first time in years. I'd wake up to birdsong, spend my days writing on the porch, and fall asleep to the gentle rustling of leaves. It felt like I'd finally found my slice of paradise, but on the fourth morning everything changed. I woke up, stretched, and padded to the front door, eager for my morning coffee on the porch. The handle wouldn't budge. I tried again, harder this time, thinking it was just stuck. Nothing. With a growing sense of unease, I realized the door was locked from the outside. Panic set in as I fumbled for my phone, only to remember I'd left it at home. The landline in the kitchen was dead, not even a dial tone. I told myself it had to be a mistake. Maybe the caretaker had come by and accidentally locked it. But as the hours ticked by and no one came, the fear began to gnaw at me. I managed to force the door open by evening, splintering the frame in the process. I told myself it was a one-time thing, a fluke. But the next morning, it happened again. And the morning after that. Each time, the door was locked more securely than before. That's when I started noticing other things. Strange scratches appearing on the windows overnight, as if something with long claws had been trying to get in. Food would go missing from the kitchen. Not much, just enough to notice. The lights began to flicker, even though the generator seemed to be working fine. One night, as I lay rigid in bed, my ears straining for any sound, I heard it. Footsteps on the roof, slow and deliberate. Then a whisper drifting down the chimney, calling my name in a voice that was almost, but not quite, human. I buried my head under the pillows, praying for morning to come. In desperation, I began searching the cabin for any clue, any explanation. That's when I found it, carved into the underside of the kitchen table, hidden from casual view. "You're not the first." The words sent ice through my veins. What did it mean? Who had been here before me? As the days wore on, my grip on reality began to slip. Was I imagining things? Had the isolation driven me mad? I set up makeshift alarms, barricaded the door at night, but nothing seemed to keep out the creeping dread that had taken hold of the cabin. On what I'd decided would be my last night, sanity be damned, I was going to hike out at first light. I set up one final trap. I positioned a mirror so that I could see the reflection of the main room from my bed. I don't know what I expected to see, but I needed to know if I was truly alone. In the dead of night, I woke to a presence in the room. My eyes flew to the mirror, and for a split second, I saw it. Tall, impossibly pale, with eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. It was watching me, and then, in a blink, it was gone. I fled at dawn, leaving everything behind. It wasn't until I was safely back in the city that I learned the truth. The cabin I'd rented wasn't supposed to be available. Its owner had vanished in those same woods the year before, never to be seen again. Now, as I sit here, trying to make sense of what happened, I can't shake the feeling that I narrowly escaped something ancient and malevolent. Something that lives in those woods, that lures people in and doesn't let them leave. I don't know if I'll ever sleep soundly again, but I know one thing for certain. I'll never set foot in those woods again, and neither should you. The forest has secrets dark and deep, and some of them, it seems, are better left undiscovered. I thought I was escaping to find peace, but instead I found a nightmare that refuses to end. Even now, safe in my own home, I can't shake the feeling that something followed me back. That when I turn out the lights, I'll see those glowing eyes watching me from the shadows. I've tried to rationalize it, to explain away the inexplicable events of that week. But in the quiet moments, when the world is still, I hear it, the faint whisper of my name carried on a breeze that shouldn't exist indoors. And I know, with a certainty that chills me to my core, that whatever was in those woods isn't done with me yet. I share this story not for sympathy or attention, but as a warning. If you ever find yourself drawn to the solitude of a remote cabin, think twice. The wilderness may seem peaceful, but it holds secrets darker than you can imagine, and some places, once they've marked you, never truly let you go. As I finish writing this, the sun is setting, casting long shadows across my room, and in the corner of my eye, I swear I see something move, tall, pale and watching, always watching. Maybe it's just my imagination, a remnant of the terror I experienced. Or maybe, just maybe, the forest has found me again, and this time there's nowhere left to run. So if you're reading this, heed my warning. Some escapes lead to greater prisons, and some solitudes are far from empty. The next time you feel the call of the wild, remember my story. Remember the locked door, the whispers in the night and the eyes in the mirror. And ask yourself, is the peace you seek worth the price you might have to pay? Because, in the end, the most terrifying realization isn't that we're alone in the darkness. It's that sometimes we're not alone at all. And what keeps us company in those remote places is far from human and far from kind. The forest may call to you, promising solace and inspiration, but take it from me, some calls are better left unanswered. For once you step into those woods, you may find that the way out has disappeared, locked away by forces beyond our understanding. And as the night deepens around me, I can't help but wonder, did I truly escape? Or am I still there, trapped in that cabin, living out this illusion of freedom while something ancient and patient waits for me to realize the truth? The line between reality and nightmare has blurred, and I fear I may never truly know which side I'm on. All I know is that the darkness is growing, and somewhere in the shadows, something is calling my name. I never thought I'd be back here, standing on the creaky porch of my grandmother's old farmhouse. The peeling paint and overgrown garden were a far cry from the warm memories I held. But as the estate's sole heir, it fell to me to sort through her belongings and decide the fate of this place. I took a deep breath, fumbling with the ancient key, and stepped inside. The musty air hit me like a wall, stirring up dust motes that danced in the dim light filtering through grimy windows. Everything was just as I remembered. The faded floral wallpaper, the sagging bookshelves, the ticking of that old grandfather clock in the hall. For a moment, I could almost smell fresh-baked cookies and hear Grandma's laughter. But as I moved deeper into the house, that comforting nostalgia began to fade. There was always one part of this place that never felt quite right, even when I was a child. That long, narrow hallway leading to the back of the house. I'd avoided it then, and found myself hesitating now. Something about the shadows there, the way sound seemed to die. It made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I shook off the feeling. I was here to do a job after all. Armed with a notepad and flashlight, I began a room-by-room inventory. The kitchen with its chipped china, the parlor full of dusty knickknacks, the bedrooms with their faded quilts, all achingly familiar. But as I worked my way through the house, something started to nag at me. The floor plan didn't quite match my memories. It wasn't until late that afternoon, as the sun began to set and cast long shadows through the house, that I realized what was wrong. There, at the end of that unsettling hallway, was a door I didn't recognize. It was made of dark, heavy wood, with an ornate brass lock that looked far newer than anything else in the house. I checked my notes, frowning. This door wasn't on any of the plans I'd been given. I tried the handle, but it was locked tight, A quick search didn't turn up any key that fit. Puzzled and more than a little unnerved, I decided to call it a day. I'd ask my mother about it in the morning. Surely she'd know what was behind that door. That night, as I tossed and turned in my old childhood bedroom, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The house creaked and settled around me, each noise making me jump. Just as I was finally drifting off, I heard it, a soft rhythmic tapping. Knock, knock, knock. It was coming from down the hall, from behind that locked door. My heart pounding, I lay frozen in bed, straining to listen. The knocking continued, gentle but insistent. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. Sleep eluded me for the rest of the night. The next morning, I practically ran to that hallway, convinced I must have imagined things in the dark. But when I reached the door, my blood ran cold. It was open. Just a crack, but unmistakably ajar. With trembling hands, I pushed it wider, revealing a room I never knew existed. It was a nursery, frozen in time. Dust lay thick on every surface, cobwebs stretching between antique furniture. An ornate crib stood in one corner, a rocking horse in another. Shelves lined with old books and toys completed the eerie tableau. In the center of the room sat a child-sized table. A tea set laid out as if waiting for guests who would never arrive. As I stood there, rooted to the spot, a tinkling melody broke the silence. My eyes darted to an old music box on a nearby dresser, its lid slowly opening of its own accord. The tune it played was hauntingly familiar, a lullaby my grandmother used to sing. Fighting back panic, I forced myself to explore the room. Each step kicked up clouds of dust, the floorboards groaning beneath my feet. I found myself drawn to the dresser, its drawers calling to me. With shaking hands, I pulled one open. Inside, nestled among yellowed baby clothes, was a stack of Polaroid photographs. My breath caught as I flipped through them. They showed a little girl, maybe 3 or 4 years old, with dark curls and a solemn expression. She was posed around the nursery, sometimes alone, sometimes held by adults whose faces were always just out of frame. But try as I might, I couldn't place her. This child wasn't in any of our family albums, wasn't mentioned in any of the stories I'd grown up hearing. Clutching the photos, I stumbled out of the room. I needed answers, and I knew exactly who to call. My mother picked up on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. "Mom," I said, my voice shaking, "there's a locked room here, a nursery, and these pictures." "Stop." Her voice was sharp, laced with fear I'd never heard before. "That room was sealed for a reason. Leave it be. Come home now." But I couldn't let it go. As the days passed, the house seemed to come alive around me. Small handprints appeared on dusty windows, only to vanish when I looked again. At night, I'd wake to the sound of a child's laughter, fading away as soon as I opened my eyes. Toys from the nursery would appear in other rooms, though I know I'd left that door firmly shut. I was going mad, or the house was haunted. Either way, I needed to know the truth. It took days of searching, but finally, in a box of old documents in the attic, I found it. A birth certificate, then a death certificate just 4 years later. My grandmother had another daughter, a sister my mother never spoke of, an aunt I never knew existed. The certificates were accompanied by a newspaper clipping, yellowed with age. "Local girl dies in tragic accident," the headline read. The details were sparse, but chilling. A child, locked in a room during a game of hide-and-seek. A fire in another part of the house, the adults unable to reach her in time. As I read those words, a cold breeze swept through the attic. The music box's melody drifted up from below, louder than ever before. And there, reflected in an old mirror propped against the wall, I saw her. A little girl in an old-fashioned dress, dark curls framing her pale face. She smiled at me, reaching out a small hand. I don't remember running from the house. I don't remember the drive back to the city. All I know is that I can never go back there again. That house kept secrets for decades, protecting the living from the pain of the past. But some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed again. Now, as I sit here trying to make sense of it all, I can still hear that lullaby playing in the back of my mind. I can still feel those eyes watching me in the dark. And I know, with a certainty that chills me to my core, that my long-lost aunt is still there, waiting, playing, lonely. This isn't easy for me to talk about. I thought going back to my grandmother's house would be comforting, maybe even healing. But I was wrong. That house kept secrets, and some doors are locked for a reason. This isn't easy for me to talk about, but I need to get it off my chest. I've been carrying this weight for months now, and it's eating me alive. Maybe by sharing my story, someone out there can make sense of what happened, or at least, I hope it might serve as a warning. Photography has always been my passion. There's something magical about capturing a moment in time, freezing it forever in a single frame. I've spent years honing my skills, chasing the perfect light, and seeking out breathtaking landscapes. It was my escape, my solace. But now it's become my nightmare. It started innocently enough. I was reviewing some photos I'd taken during a hike in the mountains. The sun had been setting, casting long shadows across the rocky terrain. As I flipped through the images, something caught my eye. In the background of one shot, partially obscured by a gnarled old tree, was a tall, dark figure. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe another hiker I hadn't noticed, but then I remembered I'd been alone that day. There hadn't been another soul for miles. Curious, I zoomed in on the figure. It was blurry, indistinct, but unmistakably human-shaped. A chill ran down my spine as I realized I couldn't make out any features. It was as if the figure was made of shadow itself. I tried to shake off the unease, chalking it up to a trick of the light or my imagination running wild. But as I continued to sort through my photos from other outings, I began to notice a pattern. That same shadowy figure appeared in the background of more and more shots, always distant, always watching, and always in places where I knew without a doubt no one else had been present. With each new discovery, the figure seemed to be getting closer. In a series of photos from a beach at sunrise, I could see it moving steadily towards me across the sand. In shots taken at a bustling city square, it loomed behind unsuspecting pedestrians, growing larger with each frame. My hands shook as I realized this wasn't just happening in remote locations anymore. The figure was following me everywhere. One night, unable to sleep, I decided to organize the photos on my computer. As I scrolled through the folders, my blood ran cold. There, nestled among my own images, was a photo I didn't remember taking. It showed me, asleep in my bed, the covers pulled up to my chin. The angle was all wrong, as if someone had been standing over me, looking down. In the corner of the frame, I could just make out a long, dark arm reaching towards the camera. That's when the nightmares started. Every night, I found myself trapped in a twisted version of my own memories. I'd be back in those beautiful locations, camera in hand, but this time I wasn't behind the lens. I was seeing through the eyes of the figure. Watching myself from afar, drawing closer with each passing second, I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, the phantom sensation of holding a camera still tingling in my fingers. As the days wore on, the line between my dreams and reality began to blur. I'd be going about my day when suddenly I'd hear a whisper, so faint I could almost convince myself I'd imagined it. But the words were always the same, "Smile for me." It was as if the figure was right there, breathing down my neck, waiting for me to turn around. I stopped taking photos altogether. I couldn't bear to look at my camera, let alone use it. But that didn't stop the terror from escalating. One afternoon I was sitting in my living room trying to distract myself with a book, when my phone buzzed. A notification popped up. A new photo had been added to my gallery. My hands trembled as I unlocked the screen. There, in crisp detail, was an image of me, sitting exactly where I was at that moment, book in hand. The photo had been taken from just outside my window. I leapt up, heart racing, and ran to the window, but there was no one there, just an empty street and the fading light of day. I turned back to my phone, and another notification appeared. Another photo, this time of me standing at the window, looking out. It was happening in real time. Someone, or something, was watching me, documenting my every move. The next few weeks passed in a haze of paranoia and sleepless nights. I covered every mirror, every reflective surface in my home. I couldn't shake the feeling that if I caught a glimpse of my reflection, I'd see that shadowy figure standing behind me. I stopped answering my phone, stopped leaving the house. My friends grew worried, but how could I explain? Who would believe me? Finally, after days of hiding, I made a decision. I had to face this thing head on. With shaking hands, I picked up my camera. If this entity wanted photos so badly, I'd give it one last shot. I raised the viewfinder to my eye, finger hovering over the shutter button. And that's when I felt it. A presence behind me, looming, impossibly tall. A cold breath on the back of my neck. A whisper in my ear, "Smile for me." I spun around, camera still clutched to my face, and pressed the button. The flash went off, momentarily blinding me. As my vision cleared, I looked down at the screen, dreading what I might see, and there it was. The figure, no longer a distant shadow, but standing right behind where I had been. Its featureless face mere inches from the back of my head, its long, spindly arms reaching out as if to embrace me. I dropped the camera, stumbling backward, but when I looked up, the room was empty. No figure, no presence. Just me, alone with my terror. But the photo remains. Proof of what I've experienced, of the nightmare that has consumed my life. I don't know what this thing wants from me or why it chose me. All I know is that it's still out there, watching, waiting. And every time I close my eyes, I hear that whisper, "Smile for me." So I'm sharing my story now, hoping that someone out there might understand, might have answers, or at the very least, that it might serve as a warning. Be careful what you capture in your photos. You never know what might be looking back. I never thought moving into a new apartment would lead me down a path of terror. The century-old building downtown seemed like the perfect place for a fresh start, its weathered brick exterior and wrought-iron fire escapes hinting at stories from a bygone era. As I lugged my boxes up the creaky stairs, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement about the possibilities that lay ahead. The apartment itself was a charming mix of old and new. Tall windows let in streams of golden light, illuminating the lovingly restored hardwood floors. The antique crown molding added character to every room, and I found myself running my fingers along its intricate patterns, imagining the countless hands that had done the same over the decades. For the first few nights, everything was blissfully normal. I'd unpack a little each evening, slowly transforming the space into my own. But on the fourth night, as I lay in bed drifting off to sleep, I heard something that made my eyes snap open. A faint sound, barely audible, seemed to be coming from the old air vent near my bedroom ceiling. At first, I dismissed it as the settling of an old building or perhaps a neighbor's muffled conversation. But as the nights wore on, the sound became clearer, more distinct. It was no longer just ambient noise. It was a whisper that seemed to know my name. Sarah, it would call so softly I almost thought I was imagining it. "Sarah, can you hear me?" I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just the wind or my mind playing tricks on me in a new environment. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The voice was too clear, too intentional to be explained away. Desperate for answers, I called the building's maintenance man. He listened to my concerns with a skeptical frown, then spent an hour tapping pipes and checking pressure gauges. "It's an old building, miss," he said with a shrug. "Pipes make noise. Air pressure does funny things. Nothing to worry about." But I did worry. because that night the voice came again, louder and more insistent than ever before. "Sarah, please," it begged. "I need your help. Let me out." My heart raced as I lay frozen in bed, the sheets pulled up to my chin like a child hiding from monsters. This was no trick of the mind. Something or someone was trying to communicate with me through the vents. Determined to prove I wasn't going crazy, I set up my phone to record the sounds the next night. As I played back the audio the following morning, my blood ran cold. There, amid the static and the creaks of the building, was a chilling whisper. "Let me out. Please let me out." I traced the sound to its source, an old sealed vent hidden behind a piece of furniture in my bedroom. My hands shook as I unscrewed the rusted cover, half expecting something to come crawling out. Instead, I found a small, leather-bound book wedged inside. The diary was faded and brittle, its pages yellowed with age. It belonged to a woman named Eleanor, who had lived in the apartment in the 1950s. As I carefully turned the delicate pages, Eleanor's increasingly frantic entries painted a disturbing picture. She wrote of feeling watched, of hearing whispers in the night that called her name. "There's something in the walls," one entry read. "It's always listening, always watching. I think it wants to trap me here forever." As I read Eleanor's words, the air in the apartment seemed to grow thick and oppressive. I found myself glancing nervously at the vents, half expecting to see eyes staring back at me. And then, as if responding to my fear, strange things began to happen. I'd wake to find furniture slightly out of place, as if someone had been moving around in the night. The lights would flicker and dim for no apparent reason. And once, as I lay paralyzed in bed, I saw a dark shape crawl across the ceiling, disappearing into the vent with inhuman speed. With trembling hands, I turned to the final pages of Eleanor's diary, desperate for some explanation, some way to end this nightmare. But what I read only made my terror grow. The last entry, scrawled in shaky handwriting, read, "You hear it too? Good. That means it's chosen you next. Don't let it in. Don't let it—" The words trailed off into a jagged line, as if Eleanor had been interrupted mid-sentence, and suddenly I understood the horrible truth. The voice in the vents wasn't begging to escape. It was trying to lure me in, just as it had done to Eleanor and who knows how many others before her. As this realization washed over me, the whispers started again. But this time, they were different. No longer pleading or scared, the voice was now gleeful, almost mocking. "Sarah," it crooned. "Sweet Sarah, won't you come and play? We've been waiting so long for you." I stumbled back from the vent, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. The voice laughed, a sound like dry leaves scraping against concrete, and suddenly every vent in the apartment burst open. Shadows poured out, writhing and reaching, their inky tendrils grasping at my ankles. I ran. Out of the bedroom, through the living room with its now sinister antique molding, past the tall windows that no longer seemed charming, but like the bars of a cage. I didn't stop until I was out on the street, gasping for air, my bare feet cold against the pavement. As I stood there, staring up at my darkened windows, I saw a face press against the glass. Not my face, not Eleanor's, something ancient and hungry, its eyes gleaming with triumph. And I knew with sickening certainty that I could never go back. That apartment with its whispers and its shadows would be waiting for its next victim. Another unsuspecting tenant looking for a fresh start, unaware of the horrors that lurked behind those old walls, always listening, always watching. I walked away that night, leaving everything behind. But sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, I still hear that whisper, calling my name, asking to be let out. And I wonder how many others have heard it too, lured in by the promise of a new beginning, only to become another voice in the vents, another story lost to the hungry darkness of that cursed building.